I was sitting in the courthouse waiting room, still in my coat, hands clenched around a half-wrinkled tissue, when my phone buzzed. Again and again. It was my mom, for the third time that morning. I was 33, freshly exhausted from a sleepless night, trying to keep myself from falling apart before I had to walk into a courtroom and finalize the ugliest chapter of my life. And yet, here she was, blowing up my phone like I'd just forgotten to RSVP to a dinner party. My name's Brian, and at the time this happened, I was going through a divorce that felt less like the end of a marriage and more like surviving a train wreck that everyone saw coming, except me. I'd been married to Emily for almost 7 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were building something. She thought we were growing apart, and maybe we were. But I didn't expect to find that out through a lawyer's email and a forwarded apartment lease she'd signed 2 months earlier. She left, took the dog, took half the furniture, and somehow still got my mom's sympathy. My family. Well, let's just say subtlety was never their strong suit. I'm the middle child, quiet, practical, the one who never caused a scene. My older brother Josh, he's the golden boy, charismatic, loud, the kind of guy who could trip into a promotion. And my younger sister, Leah, is the baby of the family, which meant she got away with murder if she smiled while doing it. I was always the responsible one, the helper, the one who never needed much. At least, that's how Mom explained it whenever she forgot my birthday or asked me to give Josh just a little more time to pay me back. So when I found myself on that courtroom bench, half numb, heart frayed at the edges, I shouldn't have been surprised that my mom chose that moment, that exact moment, to call and talk about Josh. At first, I ignored it. Decline. Again. Decline. I was trying to breathe. The courthouse had this stale smell, old wood and nerves, and the walls were painted in this beige that made everything feel 10 shades more hopeless. Then the third call came, and I thought maybe something was wrong. So I answered. Big mistake. Brian, honey, are you in court yet? I blinked, already weary. Almost. What's going on? There was a pause. Then she let out this breathless, overexcited laugh. Well, I know today's not the best timing, but your brother just got engaged. Isn't that so exciting? I said nothing. I physically couldn't. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I'd chip a tooth. And, now don't get all mopey, okay? This is his big moment. Don't make it about your situation. Her tone dropped slightly on situation, like she didn't want to say the word divorce aloud, in case it stained the air. Then she added, Here, let me put him on. He wants to tell you. Mom, Too late. There was a rustle, and then Josh's voice filled my ear, booming like he was on a stage. Bree, dude. So, I popped the question last night. She said yes. He laughed. It was at this rooftop bar downtown, super chill. I even had a violinist there, man. You should have seen it. It was perfect. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, eyes fixed on the tiled floor. He kept talking. About the ring. About how she cried. About how the waitress was in on it and brought the champagne at the perfect moment. I heard Mom giggling in the background like a schoolgirl. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was okay. No one did. I gotta go. I muttered, swallowing the knot in my throat. Wait, don't hang up. Did you hear the best part? We're having an engagement party in a couple months, right after New Year's. It's gonna be huge, man. Open bar, everything. You gotta come. We'll even let you bring a +1, if you've rebounded by then. He laughed again like it was the funniest thing he'd ever said. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone completely. Sat there, silent. Let the numbness roll in like a tide. My name was called a few minutes later, and I stood up, walked into that courtroom, and dissolved what used to be a life. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. I moved out of the apartment, got my own place, started over in the smallest, quietest ways I could. It was lonely, but at least it was peaceful. And I needed that. I needed space to feel like a human being again. Not a footnote to someone else's story. But of course, silence doesn't sit well with people who are used to you being quiet and compliant. Last week, I got a letter in the mail. Yes, a literal letter, like it was 1982. Handwritten from my mom. No return address. Just her looping cursive on a floral card that probably came from the dollar store. In it, she said she was disappointed but not surprised that I had chosen to make things difficult. That Josh's engagement party had been a beautiful evening ruined by your absence, and that people had asked about me and were concerned by your coldness. Coldness. That word clanged in my chest like a dropped iron bell. She said I needed to put the past behind me and remember what really matters: family. She didn't mention my divorce, or the phone call, or how she'd handed me a grenade on the most painful day of my life and smiled while it blew up. She ended it with a request: please call your brother and apologize before the wedding plans start. We want to include you, but you need to show us that you're ready to be part of this family again. Part of this family again. As if I had left. As if they hadn't made it clear, in that one moment, exactly where I stood. I sat on my kitchen floor for an hour after reading that letter. The silence was loud. My dog, nudged his nose into my side, and I realized I was gripping the card so tightly my fingers had gone white. I never asked to be the center of attention. I didn't expect a parade or even sympathy. But I'd hoped, stupidly, that on the worst day of my life, they'd at least have the decency not to pile on. I was wrong. And now, 6 months later, they wanted to pretend it didn't happen. That I was the problem for walking away from people who made it clear I didn't matter unless I was useful, cheerful, or invisible. But I wasn't planning to stay invisible anymore. And if they wanted a reminder of exactly how much I'd tolerated all these years, how much I'd let slide, smiled through, swallowed whole, then maybe it was finally time they saw the version of me they'd always underestimated. Because here's the thing, I didn't just miss the engagement party. I'd already started planning something else. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something they'd never forget. And the best part? They handed me the perfect opportunity without even realizing it. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't send back one of those generic "got your note" thanks replies that I used to send when I wanted to avoid conflict. No, I just let it sit, on the counter, then eventually in the trash, and continued on with my quiet life. But my silence, apparently, was more offensive than anything I could have said. About a week after the letter, I got an email from my sister Leah. She never really reached out before. Not unless she needed something or was forwarding me a family photo I hadn't been invited to be in. So I was already suspicious when I saw the subject line. Can we talk? It was short. She said Mom was worried about me, that I'd cut everyone off and was taking things too personally. Then she added, Josh didn't mean any harm, and you've always been the sensitive one. Maybe try looking at it from his side. His side. As if there were two equal sides to announcing your engagement while your brother is seconds from dissolving his marriage. I didn't reply to her either. And that was the beginning of the avalanche. Because what I didn't realize back then, what I hadn't anticipated, is that when you stop playing your assigned role in a toxic family system, the rest of the cast starts to panic. The quiet middle child role? That was mine. The peacemaker. The guy who'd show up early, stay late, help set up the tables and take out the trash, while everyone else posed for photos and took credit. I was the one who sent flowers when Mom was sick, even though Josh got the praise for being such a good son, just for showing up late with a store-bought soup. I was the one who lent Leah money 3 times for car repairs she never paid back, only for her to call me stingy when I asked her to stop shopping while she still owed me. So when I went dark, completely and without explanation, it wasn't just seen as withdrawal. It was seen as betrayal. They started testing the boundaries slowly. First, more emails. Then calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Then a text from Josh's fiancée, Amanda, saying, hey, not sure if you got our invite, but we'd love for you to come to our engagement brunch next weekend. It won't be the same without you. Love. I stared at that message for a long time. Amanda was always fine. Surface level nice. But there was a sharpness to her niceness. The kind of person who compliments your outfit while staring at the stain on your shirt. She never liked me. Once, at Christmas, I brought a bottle of wine and she loudly asked, did Brian actually bring something this year? Like it was some inside joke I hadn't been letting on. I didn't reply. Then came the guilt campaign. Mom left me a voicemail, first time in months, sniffling and saying she didn't understand why you're punishing us like this. She said the family had tried so hard to include me, and that she was disappointed I'd chosen to hold a grudge over something so small. That word again. Small. As if the fact that they emotionally blindsided me on one of the most traumatic days of my life was just a minor misstep. As if my pain was a paper cut they were tired of hearing about. The next week, I saw Leah post a family photo on Instagram from the brunch Amanda mentioned. Everyone was there. Mom, Dad, Josh and Amanda, Leah and her boyfriend. The caption read, "Family is everything," and I wasn't tagged. But I was in the comments. Well, sort of. Someone had commented, "Isn't your brother supposed to be in this?" And Leah replied with, "He's been going through a weird phase. Hopefully he comes around." A phase. As if healing from a gut-wrenching divorce and setting boundaries was a tantrum. But it wasn't until the group message that everything broke. See, I hadn't realized they'd added me back to the family group chat. I must have muted it months ago. And on a random Tuesday evening, while I was eating dinner alone, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages. Mom, hey everyone. Big family announcement. Josh, drum roll please. Leah, OMG, 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 tell them. Mom, Josh and Amanda set the date. It's going to be September 14th at the Lakeside venue. It's going to be so beautiful. Josh, get ready, Bree. I'm making you best man, bro. I dropped my fork. Best man. I reread it 3 times. Then again, was this a joke? Some twisted attempt to draw me back in by pretending nothing was wrong? Mom, we'll be doing family photos early in the day, so don't be late this time. Leah, LOL, remember last time Brian was late and missed the whole cousin's pic. Josh, classic Bree. I felt my stomach twist. They weren't just brushing things under the rug. They were repaving the road like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't disappeared for 6 months. Like I was just expected to fall back in line, wear a tux, and give a toast about how happy I was for my brother. I left the chat without saying a word. The next day, I got a letter at work. It was hand-delivered to reception, sealed with one of those wax stamps like it was from some medieval royal family. Inside was a formal wedding invitation, white cardstock, gold lettering, the works. My name was printed in thick calligraphy. Brian Michael Caldwell, best man. There was a handwritten note inside. Josh's handwriting. I know things have been weird, but I want you there. You're my brother. Let's put the past behind us, yeah? The bachelor party's going to be insane. And you better have a killer toast ready. No excuses. Josh, I don't know what bothered me more, that he never apologized, or that he genuinely seemed to believe this would fix everything. That calling me best man would erase what they did. That ignoring the damage meant it never happened. That was the moment something shifted. Until then, I'd been numb, hurt, avoidant. But that moment sparked something colder, sharper. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was clarity. They weren't going to acknowledge what they'd done. They weren't even capable of it. And as long as I stayed silent, they'd keep rewriting the story to make me the problem. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to be their footnote. I started keeping a journal that night. Not just to vent, but to document. Every message, every voicemail, every veiled insult and quiet jab. Every time they tried to paint me as the unstable one. I wanted it all in one place. Not because I planned to confront them with it. Because I had something else in mind. See, a few weeks after my divorce was finalized, something unexpected happened. An old friend, Trevor, reached out. We'd gone to high school together, lost touch for years, but he'd seen my name on a local business article. I'd quietly been consulting on branding projects. Nothing flashy, just enough to keep the lights on. And his startup needed help. Long story short, Trevor's company took off. I helped him build the launch, refined his messaging, landed him 2 major clients. Last month, he made me his partner. That's when I realized I had leverage, real leverage, not just in business, but in status, in perception. And in this family, perception was everything. They'd spent years overlooking me. Now they'd regret it. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to send angry texts or dramatic videos or try to crash the party. No, I had something quieter, smarter, slower. The kind of revenge that didn't need yelling. The kind that came dressed as silence. The kind that made them wonder. And it all started with one small RSVP card. The RSVP card sat on my desk for 3 weeks. It was pristine, cream cardstock, gold trim, my name written in a looping cursive that tried too hard to feel personal. I left it unopened at first, just propped against a stack of notebooks where I couldn't ignore it but could pretend I wasn't avoiding it. Every few days, I'd glance at it, half expecting it to spontaneously combust. It didn't. Instead, it just waited. Like the rest of them. I think that's when it hit me, not just how much they'd hurt me, but how long I'd let them. How I'd let myself be folded into their world as the invisible support beam. Always steady, always quiet, always available, but never truly seen. It's funny how silence can start as survival but eventually feel like defeat. The weeks after the courthouse call had been a blur. I barely remember packing up the apartment, just that I moved like a ghost through rooms I used to call home. Emily wasn't cruel in the divorce, not legally, anyway, but she'd left emotionally long before her lawyer filed the paperwork. It made everything feel even colder, like she'd mourned the marriage without me, and now I was the only one showing up to the funeral. I ended up renting a small townhouse on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy, just quiet, which, at the time, felt like a victory. The walls were mine. The coffee maker was mine. The silence was mine. And I started rebuilding my life from that silence, like stacking bricks one at a time in the middle of a forest. No one was watching. No one applauding. Just me, breathing again. There were days I didn't get out of bed until noon. Nights I fell asleep on the couch with reruns humming in the background just to keep the loneliness from swallowing me whole. But slowly, imperceptibly, something began to shift. It started with the journal. At first, it was just a place to vent. Scribbled lines about Josh's smug texts or Mom's voicemail guilt trips. But over time, I started writing about more than them. I wrote about me, my memories, things I missed, things I wanted, the kind of life I used to daydream about when I was stuck at family barbecues, grilling while everyone else took photos. I rediscovered things I'd forgotten I loved, books I'd meant to read, songs I hadn't listened to in years. I started walking every evening, not with any fitness goal in mind, just to be outside, just to move, just to feel like I still had a body and not just a brain wrapped in grief. Then came the emails from Trevor. He ran a small but growing startup focused on brand identity and product storytelling. I'd done some freelance work in the past, copywriting, marketing strategy, but I never committed to it full time. Not because I couldn't, but because, honestly, I'd always convinced myself I wasn't the type to take risks. Trevor remembered otherwise. He'd seen the high school version of me, the one who ran the school paper, organized fundraisers, helped the local shop rebrand when I was 17 just for the experience. "You've always had the mind for this," he told me on our first call. "You just forgot for a while." So I said yes. At first, I just worked on weekends. Helped him with launch copy and social media tone. But one thing led to another, and within 3 months, I was handling half his client work. By spring, I was full-time. By summer, he made me partner. It felt unreal, but not in the fairy tale way. More like I'd been swimming underwater for years and had finally breached the surface. And still, I told no one. Not my mom. Not Josh. Not Leah. They didn't ask anyway. They assumed, I'm sure, that I was still spiraling. That I was nursing my ego in a dim apartment, surrounded by pizza boxes and self-pity. I let them keep their narrative. Because while they were planning table arrangements and flower bouquets, I was building something real, something mine. Trevor and I landed a major client in early July, an eco-tech brand looking to reintroduce itself to the market. We pitched a bold rebrand strategy, rewrote their messaging from the ground up, and the campaign went viral in the niche they were targeting. Suddenly, our inboxes were flooded. Agencies asking to collaborate, influencers tagging our work. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that night, staring at the metrics and thinking, not, I made it, but something quieter, something stronger. I'm not broken. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like me. I started dressing better. Not for anyone else, just for myself. Waking up earlier. Cooking full meals again. I adopted a second dog, an older rescue mutt with one ear and a crooked tail. Named him Murphy. He and Max became inseparable. Somewhere in there, I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped dreading weekends. I stopped feeling like I had to explain my choices. And then, on a random Tuesday morning, I opened the RSVP card. I stared at the little checkbox, will attend, or regretfully declines. And I smiled. Because for the first time, I had a choice. Not just about the wedding, but about everything. Who I let into my life. What I tolerated. What version of me I wanted to keep. And what parts one was finally ready to bury. I didn't check either box. Instead, I picked up my pen and wrote one sentence at the bottom of the card. Thank you for the invitation. I have other plans. I slid it back into the envelope, sealed it shut, and dropped it in the mailbox on my way to a meeting. That should have been the end of it. But of course it wasn't. Because the RSVP wasn't a boundary to them. It was a threat. A few days later, Leah called me, block number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Brian," she said, her voice flat. You sent back your RSVP? I did. With that note. I said nothing. She exhaled sharply, like I'd just confessed to burning the family Christmas tree. Do you have any idea how this looks? She asked. To Mom? To Josh? To everyone who's been asking where you are? You're making a scene. No, I said calmly. I'm just not playing along anymore. You could have just come, said congrats, been civil. But no, you have to make it about you. There it was again. That phrase. The same one Mom had used the day of the courthouse. The same one Josh had joked about in the group chat. The same one they always threw at me when I dared to ask for something different. Maybe, I said slowly, you guys should try seeing what it looks like when I actually do make something about me. Click. She hung up. I sat there for a while, letting the quiet return. And that's when the idea began to form. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. They wanted to rewrite the story. Paint me as the bitter brother. The flake. The unstable one who couldn't get over a little divorce. But I had a different story. One they didn't know. One I'd been writing in the background while they planned centerpieces. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let that story speak. Not with anger. Not with drama. But with precision. With presence. With power. They wanted a best man. I was going to show them exactly what kind of man I'd become. I didn't strike immediately. That's not how this kind of story works. At least, not if you want it to really land. I wasn't interested in some petty, impulsive outburst that gave them the satisfaction of saying, see, we knew he'd overreact. No, what I wanted, what I needed, was something smarter, slower, cleaner. And the first rule of smart revenge? You don't play by their rules. You change the game. So I started listening. Not to what they were saying, because frankly, the voicemails and texts had tapered off after Leah's failed guilt trip, but to what they were doing. And that's when the cracks started to show. See, despite the golden boy image Josh loved to project, Mr. Perfect Proposal, Mr. Lakeside Wedding, Mr. Let's Toast to Me, he was sloppy underneath. Always had been. He was great at beginnings. Charming as hell at first impressions. But he didn't follow through. He cut corners. Lied about little things. Borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. Delegated everything and then blamed everyone else when it fell apart. And weddings? Weddings were all follow through. So when I started hearing things through mutual friends, distant cousins, even a former co-worker of Amanda's, I paid attention. Turns out, their picture-perfect plans were not so picture-perfect. The lakeside venue? Gorgeous, yes, but expensive. And they'd only paid the deposit. Rumor had it Josh was banking on a late-stage client payment from a freelance gig to cover the rest. The kind of payment that tends to be unpredictable. Amanda had posted engagement updates on social media like a PR machine, but under the surface, she was reportedly frustrated. Said Josh was too laid back about the details. That he missed the second tasting. That he wanted to DIY the wedding website but hadn't built it yet. That she'd started footing more of the planning bills just to keep things moving. And then came the guest list. They were trying to impress. A lot of people. Josh had invited half his old college frat brothers, most of whom he hadn't spoken to in years, along with Amanda's extended family from 3 different states. The headcount had ballooned past 180, which wouldn't be a problem if they weren't trying to look rich while operating on a budget that said please don't open another credit card. That was when I saw it, the opportunity. Not a weakness to exploit. A pressure point. Because if there's one thing Josh hates, it's embarrassment. He thrives on praise. Lives for applause. Needs the room to believe he's already succeeded before he's done anything. And nothing threatens that illusion more than someone showing up who knows the truth. And I knew a lot of truth. I just needed a way to bring it all together. So I made a plan. And it started, ironically, by saying yes. I didn't tell anyone, of course. I just quietly went back into the RSVP system through the wedding link Amanda had finally posted. The site was painfully basic. No photos, no backstory, just logistics. It looked like Josh had thrown it together in 20 minutes and called it a day. I RSVP'd yes and selected best man from the drop-down list, then scrolled to the bottom where it asked, will you be giving a toast? I checked yes, and then I called Trevor. Hey, I said, keeping my voice light. What would it take to get a wedding speech professionally filmed? He laughed. Whose wedding? My brother's. Long story. There was a pause. Is this a revenge thing? No, I said carefully. It's a truth thing. And Trevor, God bless him, didn't need any more explanation. He connected me with a guy named Marcus, a videographer who usually did brand shoots and corporate promos, but had a side hustle filming surprise proposals and lavish parties. We met for coffee. I laid out the idea. He grinned. I can make it clean. Classy. No drama. Unless you want it. I told him I didn't. Not overtly, anyway. I just wanted the moment captured. My version. My words. My face, not just frozen in the background of 1,000 smiling photos I wasn't meant to be in. He agreed. We set a tentative date. I booked a suit fitting. Started writing the speech. Not the real one. That came later. At first, I drafted what they'd expect. A few self-deprecating jokes, some brotherly anecdotes, a warm wish for the happy couple. The kind of toast that keeps everyone comfortable. But behind the scenes, I worked on the real version. The one that cut through the illusion like a scalpel. Meanwhile, I started making quiet moves. I went through old emails and texts, compiling a timeline of everything Josh had borrowed and forgotten. Money, favors, introductions. He'd leaned on me for years without ever returning the courtesy. I gathered receipts, screenshots, bank transfers. I wasn't planning to expose it publicly, at least, not yet, but I wanted it organized. I wanted to remember. Because that was the thing. They'd spent years banking on me forgetting. On me letting things slide. On me choosing peace over confrontation. But this time, I wasn't choosing peace. I was choosing memory. And then something unexpected happened. I got a call from Amanda. It was a Tuesday night, around 9:30. I let it go to voicemail at first. Then, curiosity winning out, I played it on speaker while folding laundry. Hey, Brian, it's Amanda. I know things have been weird, but I wanted to say thanks for RSVPing. Josh told me, and we were both surprised, in a good way. I really hope you're still up for the speech. It would mean a lot to him. And to me. Honestly, this whole wedding has been kind of stressful, and you've always had this calming energy. So, looking forward to seeing you. It was the nicest she'd ever sounded, which only confirmed my suspicion. She was worried. Maybe not about me specifically, but about everything. The money, the planning, the stress fractures forming behind Josh's smile. She wanted a buffer. Someone to smooth things over. Someone she thought would show up and behave. And I would. Just not in the way they expected. I started assembling a small team. Not for chaos. For presence. Marcus, the videographer, would attend as a +1 for one of my consulting colleagues. Technically invited, but there with a purpose. He'd blend in, capture the speech, and leave before anyone asked questions. I contacted an old high school friend who now worked in local media, not as a journalist, but in event coordination. She owed me a favor. I asked her to connect me with the caterer Amanda had booked, just to confirm something. Turns out, Amanda had downgraded the menu recently. Quietly. The open bar was still advertised, but the catering had shifted to a cheaper tier, and they were counting on late RSVP declines to keep them under budget. Which meant my yes was now technically a problem. Not a big one. Not on paper. But financially, they were cutting it close. I could have backed out. But I didn't. Because sometimes, just showing up costs them more than they're willing to admit. Meanwhile, I finished my speech. The final version was 4.5 minutes long. Not cruel. Not aggressive. Just honest. A retelling of two brothers. One who always shined, and one who always stood quietly in the wings. A story of growing up in someone's shadow, and learning, slowly, to build your own light. A tribute not just to Josh's new chapter, but to my own. A reminder, for everyone listening, that silence isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of endurance. I rehearsed it exactly 3 times. Then I printed it, folded it neatly, and slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. And I waited. The wedding was 2 weeks away. I could already feel the tension in the air, like the static hum before a summer storm. They had no idea what was coming. But they would. Soon. And for once, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the background. The wedding was held at a lakeside resort about 45 minutes outside the city. It was the kind of place that looked magical in photos. Willows draping over the water, a dock lit with fairy lights, and an open-air pavilion for the ceremony. They'd rented the whole space for the weekend. It screamed luxury. But if you looked close enough, you could see the strain beneath the polish. When I arrived, I didn't linger. I didn't go around hugging people or making small talk with relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I walked in quietly, handed my gift to the staff at the table, and made my way to the groomsmen's room. Josh was there, of course, center of attention, beaming, tie crooked, drink in hand. I hadn't seen him in person since before the divorce. "Brian," he shouted like nothing had ever happened. "Man, I wasn't sure you'd actually come." I said I would. I replied, calm and measured. "I keep my word." He grinned, clapping me on the back. "That's what I like about you. Always solid." I didn't answer. He didn't notice. The next few hours were a blur of ceremony prep, final touches, and chaos disguised as elegance. Amanda's side of the family was buzzing with tension, whispering about logistics, decorations, who hadn't arrived yet. I overheard one of her cousins mutter that the florist had sent the wrong centerpiece batch. The band was late, and the seating chart had to be adjusted last minute because someone unexpectedly brought an uninvited +1. Spoiler, that was Marcus, my videographer, attending quietly with my colleague Mara. He dressed down, camera hidden inside a small bag that looked like an extra lens case. No one noticed him. Perfect. The ceremony itself was fine. Vows were said. Amanda cried on cue. Josh fumbled through his lines with a smug charm that made the guests laugh. And when they were pronounced husband and wife, the crowd erupted into applause. But the real performance came later. At the reception, when it was time for the best man speech. I stood when the DJ called my name. The room quieted. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. Family, strangers, people who hadn't seen me in a year and probably assumed I'd dropped off the face of the earth. I took my time walking to the mic, pulled out my folded speech, unfolded it slowly, and began. "Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, because I know a few of you don't, I'm Brian, Josh's brother." Polite laughter. "But for those of you who do know me, you might be surprised to see me standing here tonight. After all, I haven't exactly been front and center in the family group photos lately." A ripple in the room. Some uncomfortable chuckles. A flicker of confusion on Amanda's face. But I'm here. Not because it was easy. Not because everything's perfect. But because showing up matters. Even when things are messy. Even when the people you're showing up for haven't always shown up for you. Silence. Real silence. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. I kept going. Josh and I grew up in a house where he shined bright. He was loud, charming, fast-moving. He lit up every room. And me? I was the quiet one. The helper. The steady shadow. And for a long time, I didn't mind. I thought that's how things were supposed to be. I paused, eyes sweeping the room. But somewhere along the way, I realized that shadows aren't created by the people who walk in the light. They're cast by the people who block it. And sometimes, the hardest thing in the world is to step out of the role others assigned you and say, "That's not who I am anymore." Josh was no longer smiling. Amanda looked frozen. And when I stepped out, when I chose to rebuild my life after a season that broke me, I didn't do it to prove anything to anyone. I did it because I finally understood that being silent isn't the same as being okay. A beat. "Josh, I wish you and Amanda well." "I do." Marriage is not about perfection. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And I hope, truly, that you've learned how to do that. I closed the speech with a toast. Short, simple, to showing up. There was a long pause before people clapped. Not thunderous applause. Polite, confused, murmured. A few guests looked around like they weren't sure what just happened. I walked back to my seat, handed Marcus a small nod, and sat down. He got what he needed. The rest of the evening was exactly what I expected. Awkward. Josh avoided me. Amanda tried to play the hostess, but her smile was stretched thin. I wasn't approached for conversation. No small talk from cousins. No warm remarks from old family friends. But I didn't care. I'd said what I needed to say. And the video? Well, that was for later. Because 2 weeks after the wedding, something interesting happened. Trevor called me. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, chuckling. "I just got an email from a major content site, like Buzzworthy tier. They saw Marcus's cut of the speech." My stomach flipped. Wait, how? Marcus posted it to his portfolio as a sample of intimate, narrative-driven event content. One of their editors stumbled on it. They loved the tone, the arc. They thought it was part of a new wave of wedding honesty. They know it's real. They don't care. They just want permission to feature it. Anonymously if you want. Or with a backstory. I thought about it. Then said, let them feature it. No names. Done. 2 days later, it was live. The wedding speech that silenced a room. A brother's honest goodbye. It went viral within 48 hours. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. People speculating. Some calling me brave. others calling it passive-aggressive. But most just said, "I felt this in my soul." Josh saw it, of course. He called me the night it hit 1 million views. No hello. Just shouting. "Are you insane? You used my wedding to pull some stunt? You humiliated me in front of everyone." "No," I said calmly. "I told the truth. For once. You're dead to me, Brian." And he hung up. I didn't call back. A few days later, I got a letter from Mom. No flowers this time. Just 5 words scribbled in her spiky, anxious handwriting. "I don't recognize you anymore." And for the first time in my life, I read those words and smiled. Because she was right. I wasn't the same. I was someone who remembered. Someone who stood up. Someone who refused to play along with a script that kept him small. In the months that followed, I kept building. Business was booming. Trevor and I landed 3 new clients. I traveled for the first time in years. Italy, Japan, then Oregon to visit an old friend I hadn't seen since college. I still heard whispers from back home. Leah told mutual friends I'd gone Hollywood. Amanda made her Instagram private. Josh deleted all the wedding photos. But I never looked back. Because revenge wasn't the speech. It wasn't the video. It was becoming someone who didn't need their approval anymore. Who didn't flinch when they stopped clapping. Who learned to clap for himself. And that, more than anything, was what they never saw coming. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making them regret what they did. It's making them irrelevant to who you've become.